Frank?
Dynamite!
Frank, come on in, man. Can I Be Frank is all about capturing real, authentic, unedited conversation. I have been thinking about this chat just a little bit because I go through little phases of chatting about this, and then I don't want anything to do with this, and then it kind of, like, you know, when you get thirsty, it kind of builds back up a little bit, and then I was trying to kind of but I'm not obviously going to come with a list of questions because that's just not going to work. But I suppose I kind of want to get closer to even, you know, why exactly I want to talk about this particular subject. And I kind of want to avoid using, I know a lot about this. Like I have seen you in Ireland a couple of years back, and I'd know a lot about it, if you know what I mean. I'd have a bank of knowledge there. And then sometimes when I start talking about it, it becomes just, I just go, do you know what now? I'm getting away from this particular subject, and then I end up again, something happens and I start talking about it. But and even I had a chat with Boris, you know, Boris from the movie you guys did, Being Here, and it was kind of a strange sort of interview or chat because it was, Boris just doesn't obviously like to talk about it really, or not like to talk about it, just we'd start talking and he'd just kind of stop and go, sorry, no, I can't say anything about it. And so then I was kind of wondering, well, was I trying to make it an interview? And, you know, if we just turned off the idea of recording it, would it have been just a chat, the two of us chatting about something? Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, but I suppose it kind of, not that they have a starting point, but to try and, I wanted to try and avoid things like even saying about non-duality and oneness, but I'm not saying that for you, I'm saying it for myself because I know a lot, but it's deeply, in a way, it's dissatisfying. Knowledge is just like acquiring a new iPhone. It's kind of disappointing after you have a look at it. But so the only thing I can chat about is this, what's happening, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so in this kind of space here, not space, but here, the two of us chatting, right? It feels like to me, I want to ask you a question because there's something I don't understand about. There's something wrong or something I don't get about this life. And that in a way, even every kind of thing that I know about this life is a known, you know, even this life, like non-duality, like knowing something about non-duality, it's like this kind of life, you know, this is the earth, or, you know, secondhand knowledge, people have told you all these things about everything that's happening. And yet when you come right to where we are right now, the question is kind of difficult then. I don't, you know, do you know what I mean about that? Like, so what is happening? There's my opening question.
All right, I was wondering, was that a question or was it a continuation?
Well, I think that was my question. So what's happening? Like, what the fuck is this here now? What's this? Just this even alone, like this here.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, we've already said as much as can be said. What's happening is what's happening. It's whatever's being experienced. You know, the only reality is whatever, I mean, one of the ways I put it is whatever phenomena are arising, whatever experience is arising, that's all there is, that's reality. And the mind will come in. Of course, this is another part of the experience. The mind will come in and ask all sorts of questions about that, and ponder all sorts of possibilities, and come up with all kinds of speculations that it is about something, and if the mind can speculate for long enough, it can work out what it's about. But it's not about anything. It is simply what it is. And the mind asking all these questions is just another experience. It's just another part of what's happening. So, I mean, in a way, it is absolutely blindingly obvious. It's one of the reasons maybe it's so difficult to talk about it. And another reason that it's difficult to talk about, as in a way you've already kind of indicated in your preamble, is because it's impossible to get anywhere with this with the mind. I mean, it can be intensely frustrating. As long as the mind's engaged, it can be intensely frustrating. And when I don't know what phrase to use, I'm going to say when non-duality is got, which is about the most neutral phrase I can think of. I mean, one of the things that I say about it is, yeah, anything can happen after that, but one of the things that's quite likely to happen is that at least a bit more relaxation may arise. And I think part of the reason for that extra relaxation is the mind just kind of gives up and shuts up. It recognizes at last. I mean, once the mind recognizes at last that all its great kind of metaphysical and philosophical and esoteric questions have no answer, then it kind of, you know, gives up and relaxes. But this is, you know, eating porridge, drinking coffee. This is envy because I'm eating porridge and you're drinking coffee. This is wishing I'd had the foresight to make myself a cup of coffee before. That's what's happening.
I can do a pause if you want.
Yeah, okay. I mean, maybe if I get desperate, but we're okay for now.
Yeah, okay. So then in a way, it's kind of like, you know, it's navigating through the world with loads of knowns, like somebody on stilts who is, you know, trying to, instead of just walking, or I don't know, things appearing and walking, happening, there's a navigation through a world, on a road, in a place, in time and space. And all of these things are kind of known elements, known things, but that is a rigid kind of, maybe it's loose, maybe it's rigid, it depends, but that's how the world is, for me, is navigating through a world of knowns. And maybe some of the things are less, you know, rock solid, doesn't really matter. It's still, it's a world of, I'm talking to Richard, I'm, you know, and there is a kind of this this kind of movement to try and figure it out, trying to try and get this and put it in a box of known. But that seems to be the energy, though. You know what I mean? That's the kind of trying to figure this out. So that for me, there's a kind of an energy to try and figure out whatever the fuck this is. And then my impression is that not necessarily that you have it figured out, but that's not happening there. There's no attempt. There's no if there's any difference, maybe there's no to try and figure it out, but there is here, and that's kind of in a way why this is happening. If you know, a part of me wants to try and figure this out, to get to grasp it, to know it, and yet another part of me, or you know, that kind of dissolves in asking the question almost, if you know what I mean, because it's kind of, you see as well, but there's still an overlay. It's still fair to say that whatever, I'm still living in a world and there's an overlay of knowns. And that's the person, isn't it? That's the person versus not the person. Or what do you think of that when I'm after that ramble?
It's as good a way of defining the heart of the person as any other. We could define it in lots of ways, but in a way, what you're saying to me is, the person is the seeker. And I
Yeah.
think you put your finger absolutely on the core of how this could be described, that dies, when I'd use this phrase. I mean, these phrases don't really have much meaning, but I'd use them anyway. When non-duality is seen, whatever the hell that means, the seeker dies. Those questions, the searching after those questions stops, not because the answers have been found, but because it's recognized that there are no answers. The questions don't even make sense. I mean, the questions make sense to the kind of logical, questing mind, but they don't actually make sense, and so they just die. And then there's just whatever's happening.
Okay. So
This
is it?
is the death of metaphysics in a way. I mean, it's a kind of a bit of an, I mean, I have quite a philosophical questing mind. In a way, it's kind of like an insult to the mind, but it is what happens. That function of the mind just kind of dies.
It does. Okay. But so it's that. Is it that overlay of knowing? Do you know that all the rock solids? I remember talking to somebody at one stage. I think it was whoever it was. They said something like, "The only difference is you know something, and I don't know. I don't know anything."
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah. Or another way of putting it would be, you think that there is something to be known, there is something that can be found out, and that's what keeps the mind spinning. And I know that there's nothing to be found out. And I mean, there is
Yeah.
a kind of pun in there in a way, there's nothing to be found out on that philosophical, metaphysical level. But there's also that sentence can mean, nothing can be found. Seeing non-duality is the seeing of nothing in a way. It is a seeing of the nothing at the heart of everything.
Yeah. So in a way, it's kind of like that. In a way, sometimes when I do have these chats, I could almost I'm like kind of at a concert, and there's a glass in front of the concert. And what I mean by that is that it's in when all the words and the knowing, I know this. I have a book of knowledge. I've read 50 books. When that drops away, there's the freedom and maybe the terrifying fear that there's no anchor anymore. There's no place to be. There's just this unknowing, and that's so vast it can't be contained, sort of thing. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like a falling into an absolute deep unknowing. Yeah. And
Yeah,
that
because
image of being at a rock concert with like a glass in front of you, I mean, I relate that very well. I mean, if I kind of think back to a period in time when I was sort of desperately seeking, that's how it seemed to be to me. I remember kind of walking around everywhere with this tremendously intense feeling, sort of peering at reality, thinking, there is something just beyond what I'm seeing, which I cannot get. And
yeah,
it's intensely frustrating. Yeah.
yeah,
And then when the self drops, it's like, oh my God, it is just so simple. And also there's that realization that, the one who was seeking, the Richard who was seeking, absolutely could never find what they were seeking for, because they were always the problem all the time. Well, they weren't really, it's not quite right to say they were the problem, but the fact that, Richard existed as an apparent individual separate from everything else, that was what was creating the idea or the feeling that there was a problem. When that's gone, when that drops, it's so incredibly simple, but at the same time, it's like, oh yes, I understand how I could never have seen that.
because that is because I am the yeah, okay, because I'm in the way of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Let me try and put it this way. Yeah, the fact that I am there seeking for something is exactly the problem. Now, what the mind will make of that is probably, therefore, I must do something to get me out of the way, but it can't do that.
Yeah.
And it can try to in innumerable different ways, and it probably will, but it just can't do that. It can change itself, you know, the I or the mind or the person can do all sorts of things which will change its nature in certain ways, change the way it looks at the world in certain ways, make itself feel better, make itself feel worse. But none of that has any relevance to the kind of the core problem, which is that the sense of that me being here, looking at everything else, trying to understand everything else, you know, that sense exists. It's only when that sense disappears that it's, oh, right, okay, it's all very simple. There was never anything to look for. There was never anyone to look for it. There was never anything to understand. There was never any secret, any magical secret that would somehow confer, I don't know, whatever we want to call it, enlightenment or something like that. It was just always so simple. There was always just whatever's happening. No meaning, no purpose, no metaphysics.
That's the unknowing dancing, is it? That's the kind of that's the nobody dancing. That's the twirling in nothing, the nothing twirling and dancing and loving and whatever. That's what that is. You described there. Is it? That's just.
Well, that's a lovely metaphor. I'll take that as a metaphor, and it's a great romantic metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, there's another part of me that feels like even if we say, you know, this is nothing, or this is oneness, or this is fullness expressing itself in dancing and loving, and you know, there's a part of me that says even in saying that we've gone too far.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that's the mind. That's the mind interpreting.
Trying to contain it.
It's a romantic mind interpreting it. A different kind of mind might interpret it in a different way.
Yeah, because I suppose knowing contains, and unknowing or not knowing anything in a way is just so it's not even a size. It's unknowing.
Can
And
I
so
just say there? This isn't about not knowing anything. It's you know, I mean, there's plenty of stuff in the real world, as it were, that's still known. I mean, I know I
yeah.
want coffee. It's dropping. Sorry to harp
It's
on about.
lovely. You need to get that coffee.
It's about the dropping of the belief that the unknown can be known. I mean, all the great stories that life is about something, all the great religions and spiritual stories and the great philosophies and metaphysics and so forth, they're all about, you know, they all come from a very concrete rooted notion that life is about something, and
Yeah.
that's discovered, and it can't be discovered not because it's a deep, deep mystical secret, but because it isn't about anything. It is just what it is. It's not going anywhere. It's just what it is. It doesn't have any meaning or purpose. It's just what it is.
That so in a way that from my perspective, that kind of sounds like something knows that this is it, or you know, when I suppose all the stories and me drops away, does it become apparent then? You know, when you hear it never left you, it was always this sort of thing. There must be some recollection or some sort of going, oh, okay, great. Or you talked about relaxation, but something must recognize. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it is recognised. It is recognised, and I think a phrase that's sometimes used. There may be. There's no rules about this, but there may be a kind of sense of sort of coming home, like maybe in some way this has always been known. But I mean, I'm a bit cautious about saying things like that, because even that's going into a bit of a story.
Okay.
But certainly I mean, there aren't any rules, but certainly, yeah, there does tend to be a kind of a relaxation, you know, as the, you know, the stories fall away. I mean, those stories, I mean, they're very exciting and they're very dramatic, but they're also kind of quite tiring. And quite a few of them are very tiresome as well.
Mm.
I mean, if you listen to people passionately defending their stories as to what this is all about, you know, if you listen to the, you know, the religious and the spiritual and the philosophical passionately arguing for their version of what reality is about, I mean, it's quite stressful.
Yeah. Well, trying to defend all that and block every corner. Yeah.
Also, the fact that most, not well, most, certainly a lot of these stories do rather go with a feeling that, ah, right, as I understand what this is about, it is now my duty to kind of save the world. I mean, that's extremely tiring. I mean, you know, whether you're trying to do it by religious conversion or, you know, being an ecological warrior, it's very, very tiring. I mean, you know, one person trying to save the planet or the souls of everybody on the planet, it's very, very stressful, that is. So no wonder there might be a bit more relaxation when that drops away. And, well, you know, maybe I could go out and, you know, convert some people to my view of God today. But then on the other hand, I could just, you know, go for a little walk and look at some trees.
So yeah, okay, yeah. So there, yeah, I suppose in that, you see, years ago I had heard, I think I heard the word enlightenment, which, you know, when you hear something like this, you think, okay, there's somebody has got something. The traditional way of the world is that somebody has got something, and well, sure. I mean, if I train hard enough, I'll get my six pack, and I'll get my enlightenment too. And then the more, I suppose, within this sort of the non-dual message, I suppose life kind of is revealed in a way, but then equally it's, well, it has to be something more, or, you know, well, I still need to get it. And really, in a way, kind of what you're saying is that I, or me, this energetic movement to try and get something, to attain, acquire, it's another known almost, isn't it? It's another thing it's another fixed thing that's known. I'm here and I can get this thing called enlightenment. So there's table and window and Frank and coffee.
Yeah. And that's just what it is to be a person. That's just how let's call it, the personal mind works. It sets itself tasks and it busily sets about completing them when it feels elated, when it thinks it's getting somewhere, and maybe depressed and despondent when it isn't. And that's just kind of the dance of separation. It's just what it's like to, you know, be that separate person. When that ends, then that dance ends. No more seeking when it's realized that there's nothing to seek. You know, and that weasel word enlightenment, I mean, I use it. It's very difficult to talk and write about this stuff without kind of using that sort of language. So I've written about and used the word in my talks, enlightenment, but it's nonsense. I mean, it's a complete nonsense. It's always invariably by the mind taken to mean personal enlightenment. I can remember back to following these stories as well, of course. You know, I mean, they're kind of delightful stories. They're quite magical and very entertaining, but ultimately extremely frustrating. And they tend to involve a lot of projection, because if we are entranced by that story of enlightenment, we will tend to look into the world out there, and we will perceive out there people who we will designate as the enlightened ones, and we'll look up to them and follow them and project all our yearning onto them. Not that there's anything wrong with doing any of that, but it's kind of a relief when it stops.
And that's kind of the stopping or the falling away of self or whatever, that apparently doesn't happen. But that that release or relief or whatever, that exhale. Andreas said something like it's kind of the final exhale or something like that. But that exhale of the person will say, obviously, there's no way to bring that about. That's like how the wind might blow a tree in any direction. There's no pattern or rhyme or method or way to bring something about that isn't there already. You know, that's not there. Is that it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, this isn't instrumental in any way. There's no cause and effect that we can talk about here. And I think this is one of the aspects of what we're talking about, that let's call it the personal mind, that the personal mind finds most offensive. Because the mind operates in a world of cause and effect. And effort rewarded, or effort possibly rewarded, and justice. And it just seems so damnably illogical and unjust and unfair to the mind that there's nothing it can do about this. I was giving a talk the other night, and I was half remembering a sentence from Ramana Maharshi. I think it goes something like, you know, there will come a time when you will laugh at all the efforts that you have made. And certainly when this is seen, there are often reports of laughter, and that laughter might be about many things, but I think that's one of the things that laughter may be about, you know, just the absurdity, the sullen absurdity, the recognition of all that effort that I made, you know, the following of gurus and the prostrations and the projections, and just the sudden recognition that none of that could ever possibly have had any relevance. And that might bring about an outburst of laughter. But to the mind that's still there, you know, to the personal mind that's still there and desperately seeking, it just seems terribly unfair. And so we make up all sorts of stories to explain that unfairness. So maybe my efforts haven't yet been rewarded because I still have 5 lifetimes of bad karma to expiate, or something like that. Or I haven't found the right way to please God, or I haven't found enough devotion to serve my guru. You know, the mind will come up with, you know, 1,000 stories to make it seem quite reasonable that I haven't yet got the reward that I'm working for. But it's all nonsense.
So this is home already. So, but
yeah, but you try telling that to the seeking mind.
Yeah, it's still, the seeking mind still is. Well, this is home, but I've got to get that this is home. Yeah. But the problem is the I've got to get, and that either drops away or it doesn't. Is this? Yeah. But either way, it's guaranteed on death. So you got to hold out, you know, another. If I better stop being healthy, I think.
We'll stop seeking on death.
Yeah, the final. It would be terribly unfair to be reborn again, seeking God Almighty. Anyway.
Well, I'm not going to get into the metaphysics of that. It's like anything else, I know nothing about.
Yeah, well, what's reborn, I suppose. But anyway. Yeah, okay. And so it's funny, you see, you can skirt around, or I can ask questions about kind of this a story element of X, Y, Z, way, you know, not being there or whatever. You can ask stories about what it's like to be over in Richard's side of the world. But in a way, sometimes I try to avoid the questions, but there isn't questions about what's happening. Because what's happening is just questions and answers and talk, but that's kind of what I want to know about, but yet I can't ask questions about it. Do you know what I mean? Because there's nothing to say about it. It's kind of like almost, and my brain just goes, it's just too boring. It's just fucking, what's there to say about chatting and talking? There's no enlightenment there. Do you know what I mean? And so then you're there above the water and you want to kind of dive in, but you can't actually dive into it. Just this, like, there isn't really a question there. I don't know what I'm saying, but do you know what I mean by that? That trying to dive into unknowing, or trying to dive into this.
Whatever the personal mind tries to do, or whatever seems to come intentionally from the personal mind about this, is hopeless. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, I want to say give it up, but I know it can't be given up. It just stops when it stops.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was kind of thinking about it, just this idea that, you know, the idea of seeking and wanting to learn or know something, and that kind of feeling, and I was kind of going, well, is that really what you're looking for? You know that's dissatisfying, that kind of wanting to acquire. So then I was trying to ask myself, well, what is it, you know, that through having a conversation or trying to ask and hear, what is this fucking urge to know or want to kind of grasp, or what is it, you know? Because that is what is happening, and you know, I could dress it up as whatever, but it's that. And I was kind of trying to be honest with myself. Well, what the fuck, you know, what are you looking for, like? And then it's like I have a poster up on my wall in the other room, and it's something like I don't know what I want, but I really want it.
Yeah, that's a very good one for the human condition.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's up on my wall. That's me, like.
I mean, another version of that is we think we know what we want until we get it.
Yeah. Yeah, be careful what you wish for, sort of thing, in a
I remember
roundabout
the
way.
slogan from my kind of sort of psychotherapeutic personal development exploration days. You know, I never get what I want, and I never want what I get.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's that wonderful dissatisfaction that keeps us searching.
Mm. It's the constant disappointment in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's because whatever it is we think that we want, a Ferrari or a new blonde or a faster Ferrari or a faster blonde or whatever, you know, what we really want is to disappear.
Mm. And that wanting to disappear is, or that wanting to know or grasp or whatever, that wanting is just what's in the way, I suppose, is it? You know, that's trying to put words on it. Is that?
Well, you could say that. I think my hesitation about that is as soon as we say that, it might imply, right, okay, so there must be something I can do to get that out of the way. I'd rather just say it's just a fact of existence. You know, as long as there's that feeling of separation, then that wanting is just a fact of existence.
Mm.
And I mean, it's not that wanting things disappears when this is seen. It's perfectly bloody obvious by now that I want a cup of coffee. But, you know, there is something, you know, there's something in that, the energy of that desire in the seeking individual, which is different. It's not wanting a cup of coffee or wanting a walk around the park that we're talking about.
Yeah. It's, yeah, in the seeking energy, it's then I'll have arrived. You know, in the seeking, then I'll be there. Then it'll be all right. You know.
Yeah, and also probably, well, depending on what path is followed, if a path, then there well may be times of thinking, oh, I have arrived, and then the kind of disappointment of realise, well, no, actually, you know, that was another kind of full sending or another disappointment. You know, because
Yeah.
as long as it's I have arrived, it can't be right. It can't be right because the I can never arrive at this, the I can never get this.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually remember when I went to your meeting, I think I'd had an experience of some description beforehand. And I think, you know, I remember being in the room and I asked you a question or two, but I definitely, when I was asking the question, it was kind of like, I wanted you to say something like, oh, that's a really good question, Frank. I think you've got it. I think there was something like that, if I was to be totally truthful. Um, when I, you know, because I had an experience and then I was kind of referring to this experience and going, Richard, and uh, and that, but there was equally, it was really obvious as well, this kind of trying to, like, knowledge or known or memories or experience can't be it, because if it's it, you have to hold on to it, and then you have to try and contain it and repeat it to yourself, or, you know, it's more, I know you know, it's not real, or it's not that it's not real, it's just dissatisfying, let's just say, knowledge or an experience. So when I hear, sometimes I hear about people having these massive, we'll say, awakening experiences, and I think, oh God, that's actually probably misery, because then it's, you know, it's like winning a trophy once. All you have to do is, all you've got is your trophy to refer to. And it's so, I just go, oh, right. So you've got your trophy to refer to your rest of your life, that one experience. And I find that kind of, again, that's, it just seems to be more, it's just a little bit dissatisfying that this is not enough, but something that I did it before or experienced before, that's, you know, so it's living life constantly through these ideas, or not, these memories or veils or experiences. And that, so it's never just having the chat with Richard. It's something in the, do you know what I mean?
I'm not
That's,
sure. Yeah, I mean, there can, I mean, there could be a glimpse and then a yearning for that glimpse, which kind of takes over life as a kind of another search. That's perfectly possible, and it often happens for a period of time. It could go on for a long time, but I think, you know, when this really is seen, then in a way that is it. What happens in life after that is in a way kind of irrelevant. You know, life goes on until physical death, and it might get better, it might get worse, or it might be better at some times and worse times. All sorts of things can happen, anything can arise, and yet, you know, something has ineffably changed. And however we put that something, it's not going to be satisfactory. But, you know, going back to where we started, I might say something like, well, what's gone is the sense that this is about something. It's leading somewhere. Maybe another way of putting it is that what drives on the seeker is that sense that there must, you know, there is a secret, there must be a secret. And the answer to the problem of my life is to discover what that secret is. And the secret is there is no secret. But that doesn't work on a mental level. If I say, well, the answer is there, you know, the answer is there is no secret. And the mind might go away and play with that philosophically for the next 5 years. It doesn't make any difference. So the mind thinking, I understand now. Richard has said there is no secret. I'll stop reading my philosophical and metaphysical books, and I'll stop going to teachers, and there is no. I mean, it's just completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter what the mind says or doesn't say or doesn't do. What makes the difference is when that whole sense simply drops away. And that doesn't necessarily have any bearing at all on the quality of the life which is then lived. It may do, may not. As I say, life might get better, it might not. But it's not a question of kind of harping back to this kind of amazing, amazing event in which this was seen. And ecstasy was felt, and whatever. I mean, what are called awakening or liberation events, I mean, they can be very juicy.
Okay.
But that's not the point. The point is just that the one who thought this was about something and that they needed to find out what it was about has gone, left the building.
Mm-hmm.
I used to follow gurus and read books about enlightenment, magical enlightenment in a state of entranced, almost hypnosis. And these stories were wonderful. You know, the expectations they set up and the projections that we put on these wonderful gurus and so forth. But that all just collapses.
Yeah. Hmm. It is funny in a way. You know, the first time I heard about this thing, I found Awakening to the Dream, the book, Leo Hortang's book, and this is a while ago. But I think I saw it on Amazon, and the sentence just was there. There is no, when you kind of said it there a second ago, but nobody being there. There's no one there. And then I think his particular one, there's no one that'll get enlightenment because it's non-personal. There's nobody there. But the sentence, there's no one there, always, and still kind of always go, fucking hell, like, what do you mean there's nobody there? Now, those couple of sentences, I've probably, the amount of times I've had them, and I'm still going, holy, what are you saying? Even I should just go, okay, right, well, there's nobody there, right, I'll move on. But I still kind of get surprised by it. It's kind of like, it's the one thing that kind of just gets me every time. I kind of go,
there's a complete disjunct between the mind reading those words,
yeah,
and the actual seeing of that. I mean, there is a total disjunct. But the trouble is, for the one who, well, this is a bad way of putting it, but never mind, forgive me, for the one who sees that there's nobody there, if there's an impulse to communicate about it, which there isn't always, but obviously in some cases there is, in Leo's and my case there obviously is. Unfortunately, the only way to communicate it is through ideas using words and knowing that that's hopeless. But there is no connection between the mind struggling with, or even possibly philosophically understanding that sentence, there's no one there, and the actual seeing of it. They just don't meet.
Oh no, I know. I suppose what I was kind of trying to say was this idea that I almost feel it kind of an excitement or something in my body. A kind of like this. It just kind of like rings a bell, or it's kind of this little delight or something. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's just mad. I think it's like, but I've heard it loads and loads and loads of times. What I'm saying to you, and then but every time I kind of hear it, still go, it kind of grabs me a little bit. Which means there's nobody there, but it's a kind of, I might grapple with other sentences or whatever, but that one kind of, I get excited about it a little bit. I don't know why I get excited about it. So from the very first time I read the sentence, it wasn't it was kind of like, when you're a teenager and you see a woman and you kind of go, what the fuck, in a different way suddenly, you know what I mean? It's kind of like that kind of thing.
Yeah. So
But
there's
it's not up here. I don't go, what do you mean there's nobody there? It just kind of goes, what did you say again? Say that again. So that's there's a long way of me saying I wanted you to say that sentence again, even though I fucking heard it loads, and it doesn't do anything for me, but yet something about it just makes.
No, I get that absolutely. So there is something there that resonates with that, which, you know, the something there that resonates with that is beyond the mind, is not the mind. Absolutely.
It's a tickle. It's a tickle.
That's
It's a little
why
tickle.
I think that's why many of us get addicted to this stuff. I mean, you know, in my case, for years there was no interest whatsoever in this communication, in the communication non-duality, and then suddenly there was. Suddenly I was an addict.
Yeah.
You know, there's no explanation for that. I can't explain it, but you know, suddenly something in here kind of started resonating with it. So yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Quite often, what happens for people is, you know, this becomes an obsession, and you know, talking about books, talking about Leo's books, this becomes the only thing people can read about.
Yeah.
Goes out of the window and it's just non-duality, non-duality, non-duality. And then maybe sometime later, you know, if this is seen, if it's really got, and then a little while after that, you see a figure walking up the road with a cardboard box filled with non-duality books, taking it to their local charity shop. It's like it served its purpose. I mean, I say that because I know somebody in England for whom exactly that happened, you know. But it's kind of, I just said it served its purpose, which is a very careless way for me to speak because it makes it sound instrumental again. But
yeah,
you know what I mean, you know, it is.
I do know what you mean.
It's like a drug addict. It's like a drug addiction. This stuff for a while.
Yeah, well, I was definitely on that. You know, I mean, I was Amazon's #1 customer at one stage, and then maybe it changed slightly when I read that line by Leo. Well, it changed completely, actually, in the sense. But then it was just focusing on non-duality for a long time, and then I think just you get so disappointed so often when you hear this that you know, just it becomes obvious. It becomes obvious the disappointment is, unless you're going back for more disappointment, then it's disappointment. So, you know, there's nothing to get here. And that's, but yet, you know, that sentence or whatever, that, like I described at the very start, a sort of a thirst comes first. And I go, you know, sometimes I've gone, a few years ago, I remember going to a meeting and going, right, well, I'm never going to a meeting again. But like, it's thirst, you just get thirsty for it, for whatever reason, thirsty to hear it or talk about it, and thirsty for disappointment. I don't know.
The important phrase there is for whatever reason, or for no reason.
For no reason.
It's a mystery. But it clearly happens that some of us are seized, you know, to borrow from Ramana Maharshi's phrase, you know, some of us are seized by the tiger of non-duality.
Yeah.
Around by it.
Yeah. And it's a strange sort of thing, this uncompromising message, we'd say, you know, where there's, it's just a strange kind of, I suppose I'm going from memory a little bit, but it kind of lets you, this sounds ridiculous to say, it kind of lets you know, but there is no way to approach or get to know this or hold on to it or grab it or put it in a box or claim ownership of it, because it's like trying to grab onto thin air, and it's like trying to hold water with your hands. It's just, there's nothing. And I mean, you know, I remember going to one of them, I just got I didn't go to many, to be honest, but one Tony Parsons meeting, and I just got really, I just wanted to run for this. I went a bit mad after it. I wanted to run for the stars. So I wanted to run so far away from it. because I was kind of going there with this, yeah, no, I think I kind of get this now. And then it's kind of in that this is the strange sort of thing. Like there's just no holding on to something that is everything. Maybe I don't know what I'm saying there really.
Yeah, we can't. Yeah, we can't grasp this. We can't hold on to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It just is what it is.
Mm.
There's no understanding why it provokes what it provokes. I think most people simply aren't interested, obviously. You know, some people it provokes anger, some people it provokes addiction. It's complete mystery as to why.
Mm. Mm. I don't know if I have anything else to ask you. Yeah. Mm. Yeah.
Rendered speechless by non-duality.
Not the first time, I'm sure. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. It's a bit nuts, all right.
What was that?
It's a bit nuts.
Well, in a way, yeah. In another way, it's the only sanity. You know, the insanity is in all those stories of meaning that are so passionately being pushed upon us
Mm.
and competed over and fought over, all the different versions of God and the other great stories of meaning and purpose. Really, in a way, they're the real madness. This is the only, I would say, this is the only sanity.
Yeah.
This is reality without all those whistles and bells.
Yeah. I suppose it's the fall in the way of everything then, really, isn't it? Just the life without a story,
Yeah,
life without
meaning, purpose,
meaning,
story, narrative.
center.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And all of that is replaced maybe by a walk around the park, the noticing of the wind rustling in the trees. Now, to the mind, well, it depends on the type of mind, but to most personal minds, that doesn't sound like a very good bargain.
Mm.
Most personal minds would rather have their metaphysics.
The universe, yeah. I want the universe in my pocket, yeah. Yeah. I want to know the stars and know everything and hold on to everything, yeah.
Yeah.
Own it, gather it in, you know.
I mean, we could say, I mean, it's a bit dramatic. We could say, yeah, the mind, really craves for, okay, let's use the most melodramatic, ridiculous words we can, enlightenment. The mind craves for enlightenment, but if it could really know what enlightenment was, it wouldn't go near it because it has to give so much up. But then that then begins to sound like, a task for the mind. Right, I will sacrifice my philosophers and so on. No, absolutely not. That doesn't work either. Actually, the mind doesn't really have to give anything up at all, because what's revealed is that the mind doesn't exist. And so as the mind disappears, it takes its metaphysical stories with it. Stories of meaning, stories of purpose, whatever.
Time and space and linear and yeah, just movement and going towards and history and
Yeah.
I'm going to get somewhere and
particularly going towards, going towards something which is hopefully better and purposeful, and there is a goal, particularly the loss of that.
Yeah, you can see why that's a relief as well, that you can it is a, or is it, I'm saying, you know, I've heard psychosomatic, it's felt, an energetic thing that dissolves, or is that true? You know, the self is energetic.
Yeah, I mean, it's again
contraction.
Yeah, again, I think, you know, words are very misleading, but it's probably as good a way of putting it as anything that we are talking about. And the usual phrase that's used, or a common phrase, is an energetic shift. In other words, this isn't a change of mind, or a change of opinion, or a change of view, or even a change of viewpoint. And if it was any of those things, probably the mind would be able to do something about it. Probably the mind could get itself to any of those things, but it's not. It's for want of a better phrase, an energetic shift. Yeah. It's a movement from contraction into expansion, and that can only happen energetically, and it's not within our power.
Yeah. A lot of the time, you know, because in my time, I suppose I've read a lot of, you know, a lot of books, and words then come into my mind about the, you know, like watering the desert or whatever. But that's what, when I'm listening to you there, or this kind of sense of the chat, there is a little bit of that going on, but not, you know, not like getting something, just a feeling of it. That's all. Yeah.
Well, I think that's why some of us like hanging out together, you know, giving meetings and going to meetings and things like that. It's, you know, there is something, I'll use this word, it's not a good word there, it does feel like something you're nurturing. You know, talking to people and being around people and reading people, where, you know, what we're talking about here is at least understood, isn't regarded as insane and so forth.
Yeah. Well, there is a lovely freedom about it in when there isn't an agenda, or there's no it's
absolutely, that's the that wonderful quote, I can't remember who it's from, there's something of the wind of freedom blowing through Advaita. Absolutely, yeah, no agenda.
Yeah, it's just that kind of the freedom, just that because the mystery of the whole fucking thing, and it's that unfiltered, sort of unbridled, maybe, I don't know, it's wild.
absolutely. It's wild, it's free, it's unfiltered. Yeah. Yeah, there's no rules, there's no teaching, no holy books. Yeah. No reverends, no gurus. Absolutely. It just destroys all of that. I mean, I think this is one of the reasons why some people resist this so fiercely. I mean, it obviously is resisted very fiercely by some people, and it can make people very angry, and other people it's just like such a breath of fresh air. Even, you know, even the kind of I'll call it intellectual understanding, even the sort of understanding of it on a mind level for some people can be immensely freeing. Yeah. Overthrows all those stories we've been told about meaning and purpose and necessity, and the necessity of being this way rather than that way, and following this teacher or this prophet rather than that prophet, and reading this holy book rather than that holy book, and all of that. Just a great bonfire of all of that nonsense.
Yeah, all that horse manure. Yeah. It's an attempt to constrict, or I don't know what it is that is, but it's always, I've got something and I can show you, I can definitely give it to you. And
it's always about power. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some form
It is always that. Something to validate whatever I've been through, I can show you the way to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And whatever I believe in, if I can get you to believe in it as well, then that reassures me, in my opinion. Yeah, it can get pretty toxic, all that stuff. So yeah, there can be a huge relief coming across this just on that level. On the other hand, for a different kind of personality, there can also obviously be huge anger. This may challenge everything that I have devoted, you know, the last 80 years of my life to, or whatever. You know, if I've just devoted 60 years of my life to serving, you know, Jehovah, then this is pretty bad news.
Yeah. Yeah, you've ruined the party, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I know I've come across quite a few people who have been asked to leave their parties. You know, when they've got into this, even maybe just getting into this on that kind of, you know, on the kind of the level of attraction and interest on an intellectual or mental level, and then they've started talking about it around their guru group or their meditation group, or even worse, their Baptist group, and they've been asked to leave the party, quite discreetly, quite politely, perhaps taken aside, you know, by the Swami or the vicar or whoever it might be. I don't really think this is quite the place for you. You know, I've even come across people who've been asked to leave their Buddhist groups because they've started talking about this, which is kind of deeply, deeply ironic, given that Buddhism is a philosophy of no self.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then Buddhists have been arguing for 2,500 years about what no self means. So why shouldn't you and I discuss it for a few more minutes if we want to?
It's funny. I put on The Life of Brian. I haven't watched The Life of Brian in a long time. I put it on from my kids. Probably terrible parenting. They're 11 and 10, but one of them in particular just likes that sort of humor. But there was a part in it where Brian loses his slipper, and one was holding this kind of urn with oil or something, and then one of them found a slipper, and one went, "It's the slipper. Everybody should take off the slipper." And then the other person goes, "No, it's the urn," or I don't know, whatever it was with oil. And they start shouting and fighting at each other. So the ones with the urn go this way, and the slipper go this way. It's and there's religion born, you know, in a second.
Where two or three are gathered together in my name, there will be a schism.
A schism. A what?
A fight.
A fight, yeah.
There shall be 20. On and on. And I know we know how it works. Yeah. I'm currently finishing a new book, which, unlike my other books, is not about non-duality. It's about all the years of seeking that occurred here before non-duality, and there's quite a lot of it is sort of taking a wry look at religion, or religions of different faiths. Yeah.
So is it more? This is an interesting way to put it, but it's more a book of fiction in a way. You know, you're kind of telling.
You could put it like that, yeah, if you like. If you want to say that we are all fictions, you know, you are a fiction and I am a fiction, then it is, yes. I mean,
does it feel like that writing it? Does it feel a little bit like that?
What?
Does it feel a little bit like that if you're writing it like that? Does it feel like a bit of a fiction or not? No, or how is it?
I can't answer that question. I found it very enjoyable writing it. I mean, one of the reasons I wrote it was just because I found it fun to do so. But I mean, in a more kind of conventional meaning, it isn't a work of fiction. In a more conventional meaning, you know, it's a kind, well, I call it a confession, or confessions. You know, it's kind of, in inverted commas, is the camera picking up the air quotations here. It is kind of based on memory. But in the sense in which you and I are talking, of course it's a fiction, just as this conversation is a fiction. I mean, this conversation seems to be between two people, but that's a fiction.
Yeah, well, it kind of dissolves away really quickly. But yeah, so that's an interesting and what are you calling the book?
Confessions of a Seeker. Adventures in Spirituality, Therapy and Belief.
Okay, wow. That'd be interesting. Check it. And so when are you launching that?
Oh, sometime this year, hopefully. I'm being cagey about that, but hopefully this year. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Thank you so much, Richard.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
You'll send me a link and etc.
Yeah, I put it on YouTube. Hi, if you like the conversation that I just had and you'd like more, please hit the subscribe button. Thank you.
Frank, come on, man.